Hello, everybody. Welcome to this little thing of ours called You Cannot Be Serious. This is the debut episode. I'm your host, Dean Balsamini, and I'm delighted that my first guest is the legendary civil rights criminal defense attorney, Ron Kuby. Welcome, Ron.
Well, thank you, Dean. You forgot former radio talk show
I was
host.
going to get into that. I don't want to sound like
Right.
Joe Franklin and give you the 20. You've done everything. You've done everything. You
And
remember
that
Joe Franklin, but and radio host. We'll get into that too. So, I thought we were going to talk politics and stuff, but then the Knicks won the NBA Cup, so that's like the top bit of news. The Knicks actually winning something.
that's
Do you
the,
even?
the 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 orange ball, right? The
Yeah,
round
yeah.
orange.
It's
Ah,
another NBA idea that they're going to make a lot of money off of. But all seriousness, you know, I've listened to some of your interviews and everything, and you're a child of the '60s and everything. Is today's world more chaotic or just different than the '60s?
chaotic is interesting framing. It's hard for me to assess that because things here today happen so much faster, and the response time to everything is so much faster thanks to social media and streaming and a whole raft of technologies that just didn't exist when I was growing up, or even, when I started to practice law for that matter. I mean, I remember when the big thing at Cornell Law School my first year in, I think, 1981 was you would take your telephone, which had, a receiver with two ends to it, and you would plug it into a set of suction cups to get a modem to get online.
Hmm.
So things move a lot faster now. I don't know. I mean, they were pretty chaotic then, and they certainly are chaotic now.
Well, it also speeds up the reaction time when people don't have a chance to kind of settle or take things in, digest them, and then give a well thought out response, right, for
Yeah,
everything.
we're not big on well thought out responses in America today. That's something we're not doing a lot of.
I mean, I always find it amusing. This is an era when you have guys covering sports in their 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever, and they're breathless, spitting back, some 21-year-old ball player on his couch texting something that they don't really, they're not going to worry about if you bring up you said this now and you said that then. They're just riffing, and they report that as news. And the same thing with our politicians, obviously the man in the White House too. So
Yeah, I mean, and I can't even assess, frankly, whether things are worse today than they were, in the 70s. Because it is like, worse for who? Certainly, things are a lot worse for immigrants and people who want to come to this country, people who are already here in this country. Uh, we, on the other hand, don't have lynchings going on in any great number. We don't yet have some sort of mindless foreign war claiming, tens of thousands of American youth. So, it's a dark day for civil liberties, certainly, in terms of what the Trump administration is doing in consolidating power in the executive branch and using the Department of Justice as a sort of personal revenge squad. But we've always had a fair bit of that as well. And certainly police practices, police procedures are so much better than where they were when I started practicing law in 1984. far fewer opportunities to convict innocent people, and a lot more transparency. I mean, we have police-worn body cameras now, so we know what actually happened, and it's not a question of do you believe the cop or the alleged criminal. So I don't know that things are worse now, but they are pretty bad now.
And has the rule of law ever been tested the way it is today?
Yeah, it has it multiple times in our country's history. It was tested. I mean, if we just want to talk about the World War II and after era, right, without going further back, we had mass internment of Japanese citizens, Japanese Americans, American citizens of Japanese ancestry. They were moved by the hundreds of thousands to concentration camps, much of their property confiscated, and they were forced to live under fairly horrific conditions until the end of World War II, and the Supreme Court had no problem with it. We had the McCarthy era, where any type of public dissent, whether it was as gentle as being a union organizer or a liberal, or as revolutionary as being a communist, was dealt with in exactly the same way. You are disloyal, you are a traitor, people getting fired from their jobs. We didn't have doxing back then, but we had the equivalent of spreading the news that such and such is a suspected communist or suspected sympathizer or a pinko, as was said, and they found themselves out of work in their professions as well as publicly. And I can continue this to talk about the persecution of the anti-war movement in the 60s and 70s, the attacks on the Black Panthers, the shooting at Kent State, for which nobody paid any price. And I can continue on and on and on, just sort of like listing atrocities that took place in the so-called good old days, well before Donald Trump was doing his evil stuff.
Yeah, speaking of Mr. DJT, you've rubbed shoulders, obviously, and battled with him over the years. You're a veteran New Yorker, and going back to the Central Park now exonerated five. I mean, you remember he took out the ads. He was calling for the death penalty. I mean, what is from your viewpoint, the evolution of this man and what changed, what didn't change over the years in his personality?
Well, the evolution is easy. There has been no evolution. He has always been this vindictive and vicious and cruel person who uses the platform that he has to attack people who are more vulnerable than he is, who are weaker, who can't fight back, and to do so in this highly racialized or charged language that is inflammatory and wrong. As was the case with the Central Park Five, the exonerated five. Simply wrong. They didn't do it. Nor did Bill Clinton fly on the Epstein plane 28 times or visit the Epstein Island 28 times, like Donald Trump said 2 days ago. He's doing exactly the same thing that he always has. The one significant difference is he's president of the United States.
Right. If you remember when he, obviously in the days of the 80s and 90s or whatever, he'd come on and the audience would cheer because they liked kind of the bombastic billionaire real estate mogul who bloviated, and that was cool because you didn't have to deal with it, or they thought it was funny, like I guess maybe like your drunk uncle. But in your dealings with him, what have you had personal dealings with him, and how did you engage?
So the only personal dealing I had with him one-on-one outside of booing him at a Mets game, that doesn't really count, does it?
That counts. That's good.
I was doing talk radio on WABC radio with the guy who almost became mayor of New York City, Curtis Sliwa.
Right, I'm going to go there.
If only he could have parlayed that 7% into 51. Yeah. And we were doing talk radio together at WABC. We had the morning show, which was a really good spot. And we had some policies about our own integrity as talk show hosts, because if you don't, you will end up doing everything for everyone for a buck. And one of the things we would never do is we would never have advertisers on the air as guests. You want to buy an ad? Great. You want to buy
Right.
10 ads? That's great. And you know what? Unless it actually like blows up in a public place and kills lots of children, we won't even talk about it on the air. But we won't have you on as our guest, and that was our policy until Donald J. Trump decided he wanted to buy a huge block of advertising for a seminar on how to become a millionaire. That was the name of the seminar. He was going to be teaching it in New York City. It was a huge advertising buy, and we were ordered to have him on the air.
Wow.
And interview him. So Curtis, as he often did, I took the lead, and I was really happy about that because I don't know what to say to this man. And so he asked a couple of questions, and then I just couldn't let it go. I said, Mr. Trump, the course is How to Become a Millionaire, and it's $1,000 a person. So if you get $1,000 a person and 1,000 people to take a course called How to Become a Millionaire, you've just made yourself $1 million, right? You become a millionaire. Well,
So, I'm sorry.
He did not think it was funny or not. He just moved right along as though I didn't say anything. It was impressive.
Probably from the folks who brought you Trump University, the esteemed,
Another
college.
scam. Yeah. But look, the problem isn't him. The problem is us as the American people. Why do people accept this? Why do people, I understand, okay, people voted for it once.
Right.
Understood.
Fool me once.
Right. But then they ask for this again. The biliousness and the cruelty and the sort of mindlessness and the
Thank you. I'll have another.
Yeah. So that's on us.
Well, I read, they say sex sells. They said, but grievances even play even better. I mean, I guess that's true.
How's that? What's I
said he deals with he plays to grievances, I believe, also because why did all those millions of people vote for him?
Right. I mean, clearly his whole spiel is about white grievance, the grievances of white people who feel that their monopoly on America is fading, is receding as we become a more racially diverse country. People who feel that they've been left behind by this economy, and people who are miserable enough and are always looking for somebody to blame. And in this case, it works out quite well. It's immigrants. It hasn't always. It's been blacks and Jews and, at one time, Irish and Hungarians and Chinese and Italians. They've all taken their place as the people responsible for making regular American white people not attain the level of success they thought they should attain. But, things are pretty bad.
Now, do you believe in the idea that Make America Great Again, which actually was ripped off from Reagan, is a code in itself and kind of like, let's go back to the 50s or something like that? Is that what he wants? Is that what that's all about?
I think for white people, it harkens back to some time in their memory that didn't really exist. Because when I was on talk radio and people would say, it's not like it was in the good old days,
When people couldn't vote. And
I said, well, give me a year where there was part of the good old days, and they would say, 1952. And I said, great. You had legalized segregation all throughout America, complete disenfranchisement of all African Americans. You had lynchings on a regular basis. And your government was busy trying to overthrow and ultimately successfully the democratically elected governments of Iran and Guatemala. Those were the good old days.
Now, your wife, Marilyn, is a psychotherapist.
She is.
What is her, and by the way, congratulations ahead of time. You're celebrating your 20th wedding anniversary on January 23rd. I did my own.
Well, it's actually our 40th.
40th?
Yeah, we've been together 40 years.
Okay.
But we get married for the first 20.
Got
I
it.
mean, our kid came to our wedding, so it's actually going to be 40 years.
Well, Well, as a psychotherapist, she must have kind of weighed in on what does she think of Trump?
She thinks he's a horribly diseased misogynist. She focuses, because she's always been a feminist, she focuses much more on his abusive treatment toward women. And he is empowering a whole generation of really angry young white men who feel that they have a right to subjugate women.
Well, what's funny is, I worked at the Post for almost a decade, and all these people from the cabinet, I used to see them in the hallways. They were crappy journalists. Now they're crappy politicians.
Yeah, now they're crappy leaders of government. And
I mean, it's okay if you bump into Hegseth in the hall at 1211 Avenue of the Americas or 6th Avenue, but it's different when the guy's with the Department of War. I mean,
Right.
I feel like I'm watching a Woody Allen movie.
Yeah. How did these people get to these positions of authority? It is, I mean, the only good thing about it is their level of crazy is such that it really does get in their way. Best example, the Epstein files. There's Kash Patel and Dan Bongino as podcasters screaming about this massive cover-up, just release the Epstein files, and attacking the Biden administration. And so then, lo and behold, now Kash is director of the FBI. Bongino is leaving in another week, but he's the spokesperson. Pam Bondi, another MAGA conspiracy theorist, says, yes, I have the client list. It's sitting right on my desk. So MAGA forces say, release it. And then she says, it wasn't sitting on my desk. And it doesn't exist. And I mean, this is what happens, though, when you're a conspiracy theorist on the outside and you're not responsible for anything. But when you actually get to a position of authority and you have to be responsive, okay, where is the client list in the Epstein files? And you discover there isn't any. You get sort of trapped in your own multi-layers of conspiracies. So that's kind of, somewhat enjoyable, I guess.
Did you enjoy when they'd have the round table with everyone from the cabinet and they went around the room kissing his ass?
I love that.
I love that too. It's like popcorn time.
I think, the degree to which these people are willing to abase and humiliate themselves.
Okay, so I have to jump in because so Ron Kuby, this is in an alternate universe. You are hired by the Trump administration. You agree to work for Trump. You're sitting in that room. Give me your best kissing Trump's ass speech that you can. I know you've had to defend all kinds of people before. If you had to kiss his ass in a meeting that we're going to see on CNN or C-SPAN tomorrow, how would you do it? Because the man is listening.
Yeah, I just can't go there. I simply hate the guy too much. And there's a lot of people I hate, and I simply don't have a relationship with them.
Right.
I get to choose my clients, and I try to find things about all of them that are redeeming, even though many of them have truly done some some terrible things, but I try to not let the worst thing that somebody does completely define who they are. There's other things there, but there's no other things.
You won't even go to the alternate universe then.
No, I'm sorry.
How many wars by the Kuby scorecard has he settled?
As far as I can tell, I mean, it depends how you count ending the war. If at the time he makes the announcement, at that minute, people are not shooting each other, he pronounces the war ended. But as we've seen, he hasn't ended any wars. He fully embraced the Biden policy around the genocide in Palestine, fully supporting Netanyahu, just as Biden did. And that, I mean, is ended. I mean, has it really ended? You have millions of people living on the precipice of starvation and disease and death because the entire infrastructure where they live has been utterly destroyed. Over 70,000 dead, which Trump assisted, and I have no reason, and no lasting results, right? It's not as though after this Trump was able to put into effect what had always been American foreign policy, a legitimate two-state solution, where is legitimate Israeli aspirations about maintaining their statehood and security exist along with an independent Palestinian state. None of that. You haven't ended the war. The Israelis ended the war by mass murder.
How many dinner table wars has this guy started for families across America? I've never seen a president spark so much, divisiveness. Even,
So many of his followers have a cult-like quality about them. I mean, you can look at Trump and as a person and say, you know what, he's cut my taxes dramatically. Yeah, do I have to pay more for household goods? Sure I do. But I'm worth $100 million. I'm making millions of dollars every year in the stock market. So I pay an extra, $1,000 a year for groceries. I don't care. Guy's good for me. I like him. I support him. I can understand that. But
sorry.
Cult-like quality that he is like Christ. He is the Messiah. He is their redemption and their revenge and their rod of iron, and he's just always been a kind.
But how do people, this is what I don't understand, and they're very bright people. It's like, to me, he reminds me of like a 3-card Monte dealer, or that guy standing outside the strip club in the pleather jacket handing out the flyers. Hey, come in here, great show, dirty show. It's like, why would you believe, it's not like he's very, there's any nuance or finesse to what he does.
Well, I think people believe him because they want to believe him. And even now, it's getting harder for people, because as people see prices rise and grocery prices rise and everything else rising because of his tariffs, but not their wages, it becomes harder and harder to be told by him that everything's great, it's never been better. Now, you're going to have to excuse me 1 minute. I have a small dog.
Sure.
That I will go feed right now because she's making little... There we go. We can fix that in post, or we can just leave it in to show that, hey, I'm kind of a regular person.
No, we're all in. We're all in. This is loosey goosey. But the thing is, I don't get the Democrats dropped the ball too in the way they dealt with running their candidates, or not being able to get out a message, the right message, or you think he just would have won anyway?
It's hard to know what would have happened had some basic, simple things gone right. Number one, Joe Biden agreeing to serve one term, which he did kind of say he did once until he kind of liked the idea of being there. Had enough people around him said, look, you've done a great job. And he really did some amazing things during his presidency in terms of infrastructure bills and everything else. Say, you know what? No, don't run again. And then we could have a whole Democratic bench. Who knows who the candidate would have been? And perhaps they could have beaten Trump. Certainly, Biden was not going to be able to beat Trump. We all saw that after the first debate. And I had lots of Democratic Party, hacks who I know who just, same line over and over again. It's like, one man, one bad night from a man with a cold. And I'm like, I'm sorry. That wasn't one bad night too. Look, I get colds too. I don't act like that. Who knows who the candidate would have been, and had Biden not been so eager to embrace Netanyahu and to sign off on the genocide, seriously eroding whatever moral authority America had, I think things would have been different. There's all kinds of things. Biden goes out and he's like pardoning his own kid and criticizing the Justice Department for bringing the case. It was a perfectly legitimate case for the Justice Department to have brought against Hunter Biden. And Hunter Biden was offered the same type of deal as one of my clients would be offered under those circumstances with a similar history, but he wasn't famous. Yeah, okay, get it. It's addiction-related behavior. So you know what? Not going to prosecute you for the gun. Take a misdemeanor plea and pay your back taxes, and we're done. And the arrogant son of a bitch says no. He's going to go to trial. So it was all a nightmare.
Did Kamala really need to write a book after the whole thing? I'm just like, the Democrats frustrate in different ways. They seem to always trip over their own feet.
Yeah, there needs to be a serious reckoning in the Democratic Party, and some of it's going on here in New York, where Andrew Cuomo, who was at one time absolutely unbeatable and the undisputed ruler of New York State, lost to a 30-something Ugandan Muslim kid named Zoran. So we are seeing which I'm really happy about, I have to tell you. We are seeing a generational challenge to this leadership that's taken us nowhere.
Well, now that I don't care anymore, and like I remember a post you had on Facebook that it's great when you don't have any bosses, so you can speak your mind. But one thing, dealing with the Cuomo people, when we would have certain stories that certainly if they were negative against Andrew Cuomo, were brutal. They would gaslight you and they would try to constantly say, no, there's no story. You'd call for a comment, no story, or let's speak to your editor. And to the post, to be honest with you, the editors always stood by the story if it was buttoned down. And I'm not talking about other propaganda or stuff. I'm talking about straight, like on a lawsuit or anything like that. The Cuomo people would have layers of people trying to kill your story rather than comment on it. I don't know what your dealings with their administration or his people were.
Well, I come at it really from the perspective of somebody who was working for criminal justice reform, reforming the parole boards, which was incredibly difficult, getting new legislation passed. And it really wasn't until the left took over the legislature that these things happened. And Cuomo had nothing but disdain for progressives. He knew that he needed our votes, so he would always do the least thing possible to get us to kiss his ass. And, I despised him for it.
going to the mayoral race, what I thought was fascinating with Mamdani was I love that video where he jumped in the suit into the water and take a plunge for Mamdani was brilliant and funny and clever, and that was in the beginning, and how where that came and how he won the mayoralty. I don't think even the media or the legacy media paid attention that the way the young people are energized by him, and everybody I know, my kids included, all voted for him.
Kids included. That's dangerous. Chasing my little dog on camera. Maybe she'll shut up.
That's cool. Like I said, this is freewheeling.
Yeah,
but there's a certain energy I'm feeling in the city about the possibilities, at least. And then, why do you think everybody's so worried about as if he's going to come in and there's going to be 9/11's going to happen again once this guy takes office?
There's two things there. First of all, the energy level. And I deal with a lot of young people because I represent them in protests and demonstrations. I know a lot of people who will be in the Mamdani administration at a variety of different levels. And I will say these, and I will call them kids because at my age, they're all kids. These kids are so much smarter than I was at their age. And I fancied myself as a pretty smart guy. They understand that for them to achieve anything, they need political power. And political power in America means getting people elected to office who you trust and who will carry out the agenda they promise to carry out. And they're remarkably good, tireless organizers. And they're very, very good at getting people out and having the energy. I remember on primary day in New York City, it was like one of the hottest days in the history of New York. It was like 105 outside. And everybody was, talking about, well, Cuomo's voters are kind of on the older side. They may not make it. And I went to they just want to stay in the cooling center and not go out. And I walked to the polling place, and there were two people out there handing out leaflets, and they were both Mamdani volunteers, as in working without pay, not the usual campaign volunteer being paid, 10 or 15 bucks an hour. And at that point, I thought that, this really might go someplace. And we're seeing a lot of that in New York and really around the country as young people are challenging the democratic power structure and the sort of fossil Democrats who have been there for so long. And I don't think everybody's worried about what's going to happen when Mamdani takes office. I think the right wing, as exemplified in the media by the New York Post, they're constantly being hysterical. Talk radio is being hysterical and such, but that's not the majority of New Yorkers. Those are the, people in Staten Island who are shut in and have to ask the attendant to change the radio station back to WABC.
Well, Staten Island also has on the North Shore, especially, there are really a lot of cool people and cool artists and stuff like that. I find that it's a generational thing, though, too. People who just aren't. I mean, I haven't personally found a politician this charismatic since Obama.
Yeah, I don't think the young people are looking for charisma, although Zoran Mamdani certainly has it. I think they're looking for people who are serious about achieving the agenda that they are being sent to achieve. There's a lot less politics of personality among the young people today than there is in traditional political circles, and certainly when we were.
Well, how about the idea that there's too much promising, like no homework and free ice cream, regarding Mamdani? Is he able, what do you think he's going to be able to achieve, or has a good shot at achieving, of the policies he's put out there or promised?
Well, frankly, if I have a choice between a promise of lots of free stuff um, and a promise of paying, twice as much because of the Trump tariffs, but eventually it'll get better.
Right.
I'll go with the free stuff, right? Why not? I think he's going to be able to do quite a lot. I think he is going to be able to get free buses in New York City because the truth is, most of them are free anyway. I ride the buses. Nobody pays. Maybe one person pays. All the others go in the back. They don't pay. The bus driver.
But is that a good thing? I mean, being that you're
Yeah,
told there's a fair.
I think it is. I think it's, sort of transportation, mass transit should be free. We want to create a society that doesn't depend on cars. We want clean air and we don't want clogged roads. We have a good mass transit system. It should be free. And people are in the process of making it free. I'm just saying it's not going to be a huge step from where it is now to Mamdani formalizing it and figuring out an actual income stream. So that's doable. I think freezing rent on many rent-regulated apartments is all doable. The affordable housing has always been an issue in New York, and I think he's got some really good minds working on ways to achieve that that engage landlords, but will stop rewarding landlords for warehousing apartments and warehousing space. Yeah, you can work with us and you'll make money, but you're not going to be able to get away with having 1,000 units of housing that nobody is living in. So I think all those things are good. I think the NYPD will get better than it's been in terms of dealing with civil liberties. He's going to keep Jessica Tisch, and I think that her days are numbered from the time she starts. I think that idea is simply he wants her because it provides an image of stability, and she did a good job of cleaning up Adams' corruption, but has not done a great job in terms of dealing with the internal systemic problems of the NYPD. So she'll quit in 6 months or 9 months and set up her own Tisch for Mayor campaign and run.
When you say the systemic problems, specifically which are in your, that you feel are at the top of the list?
The systemic problems of lying under oath in criminal proceedings, making stops and arrests without any legal basis, and still very much an institutionalized racism and utter disdain for the people they are policing. I think those have always, and the leadership under Adams has taken a very aggressive support for ICE and the deportations going on. And those folks, Kaz Daughtry, the Deputy Commissioner of Public Safety, and the Chief of Patrol, who posed with Trump on his golf course the day Trump sent the National Guard into California, they've resigned and will be replaced by people who will not be taking selfies with the president as he's sending, militarized units to round up construction workers. So I think that Mamdani will be able to do quite a bit.
But you don't think he's going to pull a bait and switch? Like he said he wasn't going to defund the police. Now, personally, I don't think he should defund the police, but I also don't think he should expand the number of cops. I always find that amusing. I think 30,000, wherever it is now, is more than enough if you utilize it properly.
It does seem like we have a lot of cops in New York City. So look, the slogan defund the police became a very popular slogan during the George Floyd era and the aftermath of George Floyd's murder and the attempt to come to a national reckoning with policing. And yes, he did support that or at least articulated that slogan. I never liked that slogan. For all the reasons you can figure out. It's a ridiculous sounding thing to anybody who has any stake in this system at all, anybody that owns a house or a car or a laptop does not want no police.
Yeah, I mean, right, but that tragedy out in Hollywood. I mean, you're not going to send a social worker to find Rob Reiner's kid. Obviously, you know.
On the other hand, the slogan I always wanted was reimagine policing. Sort of sounds a little John Lennon-ish, you know.
Yeah, you're sounding very George Carlin-ish, getting into the wordplay. Yeah, I like it. I like reimagine. It's okay.
And what that means to me is that there are so many calls that the cops get sent out on that don't need the cops. What they do need are mental health workers, violence de-escalators, other people who are trained to deal with a wide variety of situations that don't involve actual crime. People call the cops because the cops always come. Cops in the fire department, they always come. You don't get a busy signal. You don't get somebody saying your call is important to us. Please hold the line. So that's why people call the cops. And where the balance is between sending a social worker alone or two social workers or a cop and a social worker, that needs to be worked out. But the police that I know, and I get along surprisingly well with individual police officers. The police as a whole don't particularly like me. But all the cops I know, regardless of their politics, hate being social workers. They're not trained to deal with it. The cops are violence workers, which is not a bad thing. Violence, sadly, is often necessary. But that's what they do. That's their wheelhouse. And so it's not a bad idea to have other people with other skill sets answering so many of these calls.
I think it could make their jobs even easier for them and even relieve their own stress if they're in their wheelhouse of what they do and not asked to perform duties, like you said, that they're not.
Right. And the dynamic, though, is the police union in New York is very, very, very strong. And all the police union ever wants is more and more and more cops, because more cops are more dues, more members, more influence. And anytime somebody talks about reducing the number of cops, even if that reduction is picked up elsewhere with other uniformed services that provide better services that they're trained to provide, the police union doesn't like it.
Can we ever get to a place where the arrival of police officers, that people of color will have the same feeling of reassurance as white people?
Yeah, if cops would stop shooting them. Let's try that.
But how diverse isn't the police department more diverse than it's ever been at this point, or no?
It is more diverse than it's ever been, and that's good. But it still remains a predominantly white institution. Its senior leadership is predominantly white. Its union officials are, they range from Irish to Sicilian in terms of whiteness, and that mentality from the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s continues to pervade the department.
What do you think are the biggest challenges Mamdani faces in his first year or first 100 days?
Look, he's got big challenges and little challenges. His main challenges are to keep his huge base of support that has elected him to do things that he's not going to be able to do immediately. And to avoid any sort of misstep which he's managed to do so far, that is going to confirm to people who don't like him that, yes, he is, just scratch the surface. And instead of the Ivy League educated, well-spoken, young man whose father is a professor and mother is a filmmaker, deep down he's Abu Jihad Abu, ready to rain death and destruction upon the Jews of New York. And as long as he can avoid making one of those kinds of mistakes, he'll be good, but it's going to be a fine line. And he has to work to start to deliver on some of these things.
Right. Do you expect legal attacks on his appointees?
In what sense?
I guess the idea, or ginning up, the outside voices ginning up who he's bringing in again to reinforce that idea that this guy.
Yeah, I saw a name floated out for corporation counsel, who's a colleague of mine, who runs an immigrants' rights organization and is also under fierce attack. But generally speaking, the city council is likely to confirm all of the people it has to confirm, and they just have to do a good job. We still have giant bags of garbage all over the streets instead of garbage in bins like every other first world country. We have giant rat tumbling playgrounds stacked up in front of office buildings. Adams did a decent job getting that process changed. Mamdani has to continue it. It's much more the little things that will doom or make his mayoralty succeed, than the big signature issues.
How serious do you believe Curtis was with his mayoral run?
When you say serious, you have to define that.
Yeah, I know. Okay.
Curtis.
But when Curtis really, let's just say Curtis came down the escalator and won, you think he would have woken up the next day and said, why did I do this? Do you think he really wanted to be?
Yeah, he always knew he was never going to win. He never thought for a second.
But is he the guy at the auction that raises his hand, likes the juice, but really he doesn't have the money or doesn't want to win the actual bid?
Curtis was getting out of the mayoral race everything that Curtis always wanted. People are paying attention to him. They're watching him. They're listening to him. TikTok videos of him are appearing everywhere. He's being parodied on Saturday Night Live, for God's sake. Everybody is paying attention to him, and suddenly he's consequential. Or at least a lot of people think he's consequential. And so he has all of these people trying to get him to drop out, which, of course, he was never going to do. Never going to drop out.
Well, you tell Curtis to do something, he's going to do the opposite.
Well, yeah, as we used to say at the station, Curtis tries to move something. First, he hits it with his fist, and if it doesn't move, then he hits it with his head.
Yeah, and I remember you said WABC were always broadcasting Curtis for a while. He was like, he must have had multiple shows, but
right, all the time. And so, look, he desperately wanted this level of attention. He was able to introduce himself and his shtick to a whole new generation of people. And for those of us who have not heard this all 100 times over 30 years, a lot of people really liked it. They thought it was refreshing.
Would he have been a good mayor?
What's that?
Would he have been a good mayor?
Curtis doesn't have the skills to manage anything. I mean, he's the head of an imaginary band of urban commandos that shows up for television cameras. He doesn't have the ability or the interest or the education to engage on any of these issues.
Are you guys still friends?
I don't know that we ever were.
Well, you did a great job, though. I sat in that day years ago when you guys did the show, which was like the hottest show on radio for a while, obviously.
Yeah, we always had a very good rapport on air, or sometimes we didn't when we'd have an argument. But we had a steady, entertaining rapport, and we didn't see each other much outside the station. I mean,
So you never went out anywhere or did anything together or had dinner?
A couple of times, maybe a couple times a year we would, but we're sitting there in a studio talking to each other 5 hours a day, 5 days a week. Like if we had left something unsaid between us when we broke at 10 a.m., there was no need to go out to dinner that night. We could say it again tomorrow morning at 5 in the morning when we saw each other again.
Can you believe the way radio has changed over the last 2 decades for when you guys ruled the roost?
Yeah, it's another one of those dying technologies.
Well, that's why I know everybody needs a podcast like they need another Uber driver or a Tribble.
It's true enough, Dean. I'm sorry to say.
It is, but it's you still you give it a shot. And how about the way the Trump administration is weaponizing the DOJ? It's almost like a game of chess, and he's wired up with the Supreme Court and everything. How would you attack if you were leading the Democratic Party? What would be your game plan to kind of, undo this, or is it the midterm elections, or how to fight back?
Well, the game plan at this point has to be a very long-term game plan. You can continue to use, the senatorial blue slip to stop some of the worst appointments. And Trump hasn't shown a lot of interest in his judicial appointments these days, unlike he did during his first term. But fundamentally, the Democrats need to retake the Senate and start to be serious about investigations and advice and consent, and they need to then get the White House in 2028. I mean, it's his Justice Department, and he's not the first person to turn it into a weapon of his own ideology and ambition. He's just the first person to say that's what he's doing. At least in the past, some of the others had the decency, if you will, to deny that's what they were doing.
But I always say to myself, it's like, how did he do this trick? Like the person when you watch him, where he was under all these indictments, he's chastised in the courtroom, and then he comes out, trashes the judge, trashes the judge's family, trashes the jurors, and he escapes these various indictments. He runs for president
and wins.
How does that happen?
I mean, looking back on it, it was just sort of another failure of the Biden White House and a failure of Merrick Garland as Attorney General. Garland, who I know many people know him, he is the kind of perfect gentleman and the ultimate Boy Scout, and wants to do everything right and make sure it looks like he's doing everything right. Had he moved quickly and indicted Trump on the classified documents case and the January 6th case, and really moved ahead with those prosecutions, Trump would have been convicted and imprisoned before he had a chance to run for re-election. But Garland didn't do that. There were other priorities. There was this, there was that. And it's a lesson to be learned. And it's a lesson that obviously Trump learned because he's began his new term by rewarding all of his political allies, including the January 6th rioters. They're out there beating cops over the head, all this stuff. Mr. Law and Order, they're all pardoned, and going after his political enemies.
Legally, is there any recourse either moving forward or currently regarding executive orders and pardons? I mean, it's really become like, you talk about making it kind of a joke. I mean, if and do you think he's going to leave office without a Hearst tool?
Uh, I less concerned about him leaving office right now than I am with what he's doing every day. But as to your other question, the presidential pardon power is an absolute power, except in cases of treason. And that was put in the Constitution for a reason. And did they ever foresee this type of abuse? I don't think so. Although we had some fairly corrupt presidents in the past, but there's nothing to be done about it except amend the Constitution. The executive orders are just his interpretation of how he wants to run the executive branch. And there are challenges that can be made to that, and challenges that are being made to that all around the country in federal courts. But increasingly, the Supreme Court has embraced the notion that, executive power resides in the president, and that anything that is an executive power ultimately is within the control of the president, and there are no such thing as independent executive agencies. They haven't gone quite that far, but they're getting there.
In your mind, do you think he's a bright guy? I mean, like, I know people say he's an idiot, he's a moron, or whatever, but how does he achieve what he has achieved? I mean, even a con man gets caught at some point.
Well, he has gotten caught, and he's always managed to escape. There's absolutely nothing that Trump has ever said or done that makes me think he's smart.
And also regarding him demanding that time in '89 when he took out the ads that he wanted the clients from the exonerated five to get the death penalty. I remember how that had reverberations. What did you think of that at the time?
Well, I was representing one of them.
You're right. You were representing Yusuf, right?
Yusuf Salaam. Now he's council member Yusuf Salaam. And it was horrific that a man such as Donald Trump, with all of his money and whatever, would take out a full-page ad in the New York Times to demand the death penalty for these kids, which can't be done anyway. You can't make the death penalty retroactive, right? So it's just get them, kill them kind of thing. It made no sense. But he was not the worst of the worst. There were plenty of people in positions of actual responsibility who were every bit as bad and every bit as racist at the time. So yeah, he was awful, but he had a lot of company. And, finally now I think people try to forget just how hyped up white people were about so-called black crime, and using the Central Park case as an example of why we need to do blank to them.
Do you ever ponder all the bold-faced names on, it was like a National Lampoon movie, where they have at the end how they turned out? When you think of somebody, even Rudy Giuliani, America's mayor, Donald Trump, real estate man, all these characters that were kind of contemporaries of yours, and where they ended up and how they,
it's always interesting. It's interesting to watch. I mean, some people clearly got what was coming to them. Many people didn't, and some people suffered things they didn't deserve. It was nice to see Rudy Giuliani, who had always been a vicious, bullying, angry, bilious racist from the time he was in the Justice Department all through his mayoralty and his various ambitions after that. It was nice to see him finally becoming the person we always knew he was. Crazy, raving, mascara dripping, being filmed in Borat 2, lying down on bed with his hands in his pants in front of some 22-year-old. Yeah, Rudy. Yeah.
Yeah, you cover. Yeah, I was going to go with the hair dye, but you covered that. I was going to be
Yeah,
my
yeah.
follow-up. That was a horrible. That was as horrible optic as anything. And him with all the wearing his dopey Yankee rings, and for a team that he didn't play for. Um, is it true that New York? I read that New York clip where you said you had your life. They said life-changing moment, altering moment when you were at Game 2 of the '96 World Series. Was that
Well, it was
exaggerated?
life changing in the sense that the war in Vietnam weighed very heavily on me. I had so many, people that I knew who either died there or came back not the same. And it was such a pointless war built on such horrific lies that we lost, that I never stood for the national anthem. And finally, there I am, game two, Yankee Stadium,
At that game.
1996. We're playing Atlanta.
Atlanta Braves and
Yep,
Maddox shut them
yep.
out.
And I'm up in the, seats that are so high up that you're touching the clouds, but as you know, there's no such thing as a bad seat in Yankee Stadium. And I'm sitting there watching the game with 65,000 people, as the stadium then held, something like that. And I'm thinking, you know what? Country's not so bad. Can stand up again. And I
Do you
did.
like and speaking, are you still a Yankee fan or no?
Yeah. Yeah, as painful as it is, I'm still
That's what I
with
was
them.
going to ask. What can Hal make believe that he likes baseball a little bit, or at least that he cares? I find I find that I'm not going to say if George was there, but the point was, as crazy as George could be, the guy wanted to win, and I don't get I feel like Hal's treats the Yankees like a pass fail course, with the World Series really being the money he makes from the city and everything else.
Yeah, it's too bad. It is always the trouble with legacy admittees.
And how about the fact that you do you like the fact that you're mentioned in The Big Lebowski, one of my favorite movies?
That, of course, is the greatest shout out of in the history of shout outs. I'm sure that no matter what I accomplish or become or however infamous I may get, that will be in my obit.
Did you know about that, or when
No,
or
no, no. The Coen brothers were living on the Lower East Side when Kunstler and I were doing a lot of work on the Lower East Side with squatters and housing and things like that. And they just put it in the film, and it was Lynn Samuels of WBAI
yes,
fame and
and then
WABC fame, and all around great New Yorker with her weird voice, came up to me one day at ABC and said, you're in this movie, the Lebowski something. You get mentioned. I was like, well, okay, well, that's cool. It's kind of nice. And I had absolutely no idea it would become the cult film that it became and help me earn tremendous cred with successive generations of teenage boys.
interesting. What was your take? Did you know Rob Reiner at all? What was your take on that situation, as far as you know uh, mental illness, and again with you saying about trained people or anything like that? Would that be a situation where you would have had mental health people also, in that particular case?
Well, there were plenty of mental health people involved in their son's caring. I've dealt with many mentally ill people in my law practice, and just like the right wing has this notion that cops and the military will fix everything, just send enough soldiers, enough police, and everything will be fine. The left has kind of a similar delusion about doctors. This is not a blanket, it's a medical issue. Let's have doctors and health professionals. And while a lot of that is true, there are some things that just don't get fixed. And there's a lot of people who just can't be fixed through medicine or doctors or talk therapy or medications. They're just not going to get better. And there has to be some place where such folks can be incapacitated so they can't harm other people, yet treated, in a merciful and humane and supportive way. Unfortunately, Nick Reiner had a lot of money, had a lot of resources, and his parents really struggled with that. You don't want to abandon your child when your child needs you the most, but nothing you are doing seems to be helping. And it's very, very hard to accept the notion that this can't be made better.
What was your take when you saw what Trump's response to the kid's death was? I thought it was a joke at first, because there's a lot of parody and obviously false stuff on social media. I mean, we know that he can say crude things, but I was I was really taken aback. What was your take?
I thought he is showing us exactly who he is. That is exactly who the man is. Not a shred of empathy or ability to relate or anything. Not a shred of understanding that Rob Reiner's politics, that's not how most people knew him. They knew him through television and through his films. They knew him through, being Meathead in All in the Family. They knew him through When Harry Met Sally, et cetera, et cetera. But Donald Trump can only see this man as somebody who doesn't support him, who opposes his agenda. And therefore, he's happy he's dead.
And he made sure to inject himself in. Isn't that signs of a malignant narcissist?
Yep. And, that's who the guy is. And his supporters get a chance to see it once again. I'm sure they all have some excuse for it.
Have you ever heard from Colin Ferguson from prison? I know you represented him for a brief time. I just thought I had a flashback as to what, where he. I know where he is, but whatever happened.
So whatever happened to Colin Ferguson? I think we just hit the 30th anniversary of the Long Island Railroad shooting, if I'm not mistaken, or something like that. He's still in prison and will be there forever. I get an occasional letter from him. I'm not in a position to reveal the contents, obviously. It's privileged, but it doesn't shed any light on anything. I think that's fair to say. And the only thing that's surprising to me is that he has not been killed in prison.
You ever get any Christmas cards from or holiday cards from Junior Gotti?
John Gotti the Younger. Remember, they have different middle names.
Yes, John A. Yeah.
Yeah, and so they're not senior and junior. I see him occasionally. Sometime occasional social function or some sort of film. He and I have always been on fine terms.
Yeah, me too. He was always very nice to me, I have to say. And I know, like, you were in a tough situation, I guess, with with testifying that time in the case with Curtis. So.
Yeah, well, it was a tough situation, but I was subpoenaed. And I had a small bit of information, none of which was a secret, all of which I disclosed. I spoke to the federal prosecutor before I testified. I'm not like one of those witnesses like, I'm not going to talk to you. I explained to him exactly what happened, my recollection of it, what I was going to say. It's exactly what I said. And that was that. Sorry, Curtis.
What's your take for the near future as far as you feel for the country and for the city? Are you a glass is half full or glass is half empty kind of guy?
I don't even have a glass, Dean. At this point, things are so bad generally for so many people that I get up in the morning, work as a lawyer for actual humans. And usually at the end of the day, I'm able to say that I made somebody's life a little better, a little easier, a little less stressful, a little less horrific. And at this point, that's pretty much what I'm content to do.
You also love a good cup of coffee, right? This broadcast is coming from the cozy confines of Cedar Bean's Coffee Joint in the great state of New Jersey, Ron. I'll have you know that.
That's
and I read in the New York Times about how you can't start the day without your coffee. What type of coffee do you have in the morning?
So it's a funny thing. When Curtis and I were on the air together, we were doing the morning show. We would buy these giant Dunkin' Donuts.
Right, they come in those boxes.
No, this was one step down from the box. They were like 32-ounce cups or something, whatever they were. And each one was like 5 cups, and I would drink 3 of those in the course of a show. I'm down to just about 4 cups in the morning now, which is really low for me. But I've never been a coffee snob. I have to have coffee, but I don't care what it is. Dunkin' is fine, chock full of nuts. I can take, fancier brands, whatever. I like a nice medium light roast in the morning.
Interesting. And finally, our Tiger Beat part of this, which is just a couple of quick questions, kind of Tiger Beat questions. What's your favorite movie?
Jeez. I should be able to come up with one off the top of my head.
One of your favorites. So it's like, mine's always change.
The movie I've watched the most times, well, there's 2 of them really that I've both watched the most times and have meant the most to me. One, of course, was Casablanca. And the other is Animal House.
Right. Agree.
I know it's a bit of a range there in terms of cinema, but hey.
And how about what music you're listening to? I ran into you that time at the John Fogerty concert. I think it was at the Beacon or Radio City, I think it was.
Yeah.
What are you listening to now, or what do you like? What's your go-tos?
So my favorite genre of music is Irish folk music. And,
interesting.
Going all the way back to like Luke Kelly, and all the way up to today, the 2 Johnnies, and sort of everything in between. I like a lot of the more political Irish bands like Black 47.
Larry's going to do the next podcast, actually. Larry Kerwin's working on a play called Rebel Girl that he's looking to bring to Broadway.
Well, that's fantastic, and count me in. And I've listened to that music now for decades and decades and decades. And that is actually, it has very common roots with American roots music, Americana music, country music, Fogerty, and the others, which is the other kind of music that I like.
Do you like Wilco at all?
Say again?
Do you like Wilco at all?
Yeah, I like Wilco. I do, and I admire their spunk, and I admire their musicality, but the folk music that speaks to me the most is the stuff I listened to when I was young,
right.
Which is why so many people like music today, not because it's good music, but because they were in a good space, in a good place when they heard it for the first time.
And also, what's your favorite spot in New York City where you and your wife like to go, like to just chill out, or that speaks to you, that's real New York?
Our living room.
I read that thing about the horizontal versus vertical choices you make on Sunday. Do you follow sports at all, or you don't care?
Just the Yankees. I follow the Yankees very closely. I don't follow other sports at all.
Which is ironic. Like, did you ever meet Steinbrenner?
No, but he and I go way back because he's a Clevelander originally.
That's right. That's right.
So I remember him being a bad guy then.
And finally, how would you like people to remember Ron Kuby? Cliche, but always interesting.
I don't really want them remembering me because I don't want to be gone.
Also,
Just gonna stick around. I am.
cremated or buried?
Yeah, I think a tree. I think I'm going with one of those become a tree things, burials, organic burial.
Well, I appreciate your time, Ron, as always. And I'll tell Larry you said hello
Yeah,
because
yeah, please do.
I'll let you know when the dates are because he's going to have, I think, a couple of run-up type plays that, on it. But it's called Rebel Girl. And
I will absolutely be looking forward to that.
okay, thank you so much. And thank you for being so generous with your time.
Sure, and I hope your tens and tens of listeners enjoy this.
That's right. All right.
Goodbye,
Thank you.
Dean.
Good night.